Good morning, and how you doing today? This is another installment of a Joe's Book Review. Joe's Book Review is pretty much I'm reading the current books on my shelf, things that go along with my tastes or curiosities. I read them, and I come here, and I tell you about it. And if you look at the videos that I've made in this book series, this book review series, should I say, you can follow a trend and see where my tastes lay. And from that, you can either decide whether to avoid my opinions or take them to heart. And if you do, then I'd appreciate if you subscribe to this channel today. It's all up to you and your interpretation, as well as of mine. So, let's begin. By the way, today is June 1st. It's about 5:30 in the morning. I have just enough time to actually record this, get it out there, and head over to my office. Today, we are talking about Vale's Visit, A Taste of Hap and Leonard, a collection of short stories and excerpts by Joe R. Lansdale and Andrew Vachss. And just off the top, let me say, disclaimer, I am a big fan of Andrew Vachss's work. I've purchased nearly all of his work, and I'll circle back to that point in a moment. I actually got introduced to Andrew Vachss years and years ago, actually when I was collecting comic books at the time, probably my teens, early 20s, the latest. I found a novel of Batman on the shelf of a bookstore. I was like, wow, a Batman book, never heard of it before, let me give it a shot. Let me tell you, sometimes reading a text book, regular novel of even a character like Batman you're familiar with, is a different experience than reading a comic book for it. You know, being a novel, you get to use your own imagination as he swings through the city or as he's fighting whoever he's fighting. It is just a different experience, provided you have a good enough imagination. That novel told a slightly reimagined origin for Batman, and the novel itself was extremely gritty in nature. If I remember correctly, I think this one, Bruce Wayne's mother has a backstory. Turns out that she was kind of a detective trying to solve crimes against children. And he uncovers this, actually finds a cold case he starts working on, and then goes along those lines. And that book, The Ultimate Evil, showcases more of the detective side of Batman. And that translates into book form more readily. And The Ultimate Evil, crimes against children. Things like child abuse, pedophilia, trafficking, just the worst you could think of. And that is a theme of Andrew Vachss's work. Andrew himself was an attorney, and he specialized in child protection, advocacy, juvenile social work. That's kind of was his bread and butter. He chased it in real life, and he brought some of the worst of it to his novels. It's his central passion, and it pervades, like I said, the majority of the stories that he does. I had followed up that book, actually, of Andrew Vachss, thinking I want to read more of this guy, with one called Footsteps of the Hawk, because the title of the book sounds pretty cool. Which, unbeknownst to me, was actually the 8th installment of a Vachss 18-book Burke series. So I went back and I read all of them. And little did I know, I actually did see some of Vachss's work before. Again, collecting comics, I was a big fan of the Dark Horse Comics installments of movie elements, like Predator, Aliens, and Terminator. And it was one 4-issue miniseries of Predator called Race War, came out in 1993. Basically, what if the Predator hunts within a prison, a maximum security prison where the violent offenders are? That's where the most dangerous game of the most dangerous game resides. And as it turns out, Race War was a reimagining of another Vachss book, which he called Cross. I think this one was Blackjack was the Cross book that kind of got adapted for this. the Cross series, whatever, was pretty much the one main dude was named Cross, and he had like a band of mercenaries. And they would kind of come together and like A-team a problem that came to his attention in the city. And in that book, Vachss kind of went out of his comfort zone, I'm going to assume. He tried a new brand of story. And he actually had the main antagonist of Blackjack be some alienistic presence. Something a little different. And in the race war story, he just substituted his alien for the Predator. And it was a better substitution. It actually made the story more coherent. Cross is actually part of a 3-part trilogy of books. In fact, Vachss had also done a 6-issue Dark Horse comic series for the character with an original story. So there's plenty of Cross out there if someone wants to pick them up and read those. Just to put an end to this prologue, and maybe I'll have to put timestamps in the bottom of the video so people can avoid it if they wish. Over the years, I amassed a relatively complete collection of Vachss's novels and comic stories. And just to get back to that point I made on the top, referencing, I'll come back to this a little bit later, I specifically say novels because I'm pretty sure Andrew Vachss had written some textbooks and some legal or subject matter work, and they're more factual, they're more literally letter of the law kind of texts. So I haven't chased those down. I was looking for his fictional work. And to my surprise, one day, I found this. I didn't know this had come out. It was a surprise to me. You see, being a Vachss fan, I had only been around for his work when only the last 2 novels, his new novels, were released. I even saw them pop up on my Amazon. Carbon came out in 2019. Popped up right there saying, you might enjoy this, and I bought it immediately. Bloodline came out in 2022. I did the same. Andrew Vachss himself had passed away in 2021. And while I believe this book here came out in 2019 as well, I wasn't aware of it. Never heard of it. So learning that it was a new release that I missed thrilled me. But let me get past my history with Andrew Vachss portion of the intro and get on to what you actually want to hear. I'll even start at the very, very beginning of this book here, the introduction. Andrew Vachss, it turns out, has a lot of good things to say about Joe Lansdale, the creator of Hap and Leonard. His introduction to this work is chock full of praises for Lansdale's subject matter, his writing style, and his insights. You haven't really read unless you've read Joe Lansdale kind of sentiment. So, truly high props from Andrew Vachss. And trust me, I did zero intention of trying to make that thing sound like a rhyme. So what is this one all about? It starts with the title story, Vale's Visit. Kind of a courtroom drama type of story. Vale is the name of an attorney. Vale knows Hap from the past, and it's a gritty, dark past. Leonard is on trial for arson. He burned down a crack house that was across the street from where he lived. And Leonard's admitting this on the stand. And Vale lets him, doesn't even object or anything like that. So how the hell is Vale going to get Leonard off on the charges then? For a person like me who's never read or even knew that there was a Hap and Leonard series, haven't seen a story before, it was a good primer for the characters and for the genre itself. Now, who are Hap and Leonard? Hap's your typical down south Texan, an odd job working white man. And he lives off every dime as far as he can stretch it. And he does all this sober. Leonard, another southern-grown beast of a black man. Quick to temper. And also an odd-job-working gay man. The two have a history of trusting one another, of just having each other's backs. And they just stumble upon events that they just have to involve themselves into. There's a faux sort of love and hate relationship between these two, but one that exudes honor and trust. And you'd swear these two would give each other like noogies and Indian rope burn to each other as torture, just like little boys used to do back in the day. Just, in all sense of the word, friends. So, Hap calls Vale to get Leonard off the charges, and over the course of the trial, by the way, all 18 pages of it, mind you, you get the circumstances of the event laid out. As you go along, you get some of this will they or won't they type of intrigue. And I'll just say, I was entertained. Who doesn't like a good courtroom drama? Now, in my efforts to avoid things, to keep them from being spoiler-free, I'm not going to say out loud what the results of the court case are or how it ends. I'm just going to tell you it was a fun read. Now, the rest of this book is about 7 or so short stories that happen. Either self-contained short stories or maybe excerpts of the Hap and Leonard books. You know, like a chapter or two. Just to give you a taste, but close off the thought of whatever it is and not leave you a cliffhanger. Some of these include a pretty cool murder mystery surrounding a secret recipe for chili that the chef, or whoever you want to call it, the guy who makes the chili, is dead in his kitchen, naked. And people trying to find out who done it. Another story is a tryst with one of Hap's exes, who just happens to walk back into town. And this is a woman, you might even say a vixen, to whom Hap just cannot say no to. And of course, by happening in town, she just happens to need a favor. Another story, one of the darker ones in this book, there's an SA that happens near the place where Hap and Leonard are working at different posts. And Hap goes to his car. He hears noises behind the fence line of the parking lot. And he gets involved with saving a woman from a man's aggressive attack. Albeit, saves her a little late. And this forces Hap to dig in his heels and find out more. Find out who's responsible. Try to make them pay. Another fun little story is Hap and Leonard take a low-budget, not your typical cruise. You know, just like a boat that has no reason to be afloat. A lobster dinner where the meat looks a little gray. There's a trove of characters. And most of them look like they kind of love going on this type of vacation. And all in the middle of this is your Hap and Leonard. There's one that's more of a Leonard-centric story here. Old woman who Leonard known all his life kind of thing. In fact, she takes pictures of anyone who visits her at all, tapes it up on the wall with Scotch tape. Leonard is there for a visit, and the past comes out. A little of Leonard's past that he had feelings about or hatred about, they come out in certain stories that he didn't know were available, and those stories haunt him a little, and they heal him a little. Replete with skeletons in the closet. And there's another story out here involving an incident between Hap and a rabid squirrel. The ensuing hospital stay, and all that comes into it. So basically, you go through this, and it's aptly named a collection of short story and excerpts. You get a few slices of their lives, and quite the dance between them. Now, I knew this wasn't going to be a long video, but let me go on to my thoughts. As I stated above, I was really jonesed to find a new Andrew Vachss out there when I stumbled across this book. I got on board the Vachss train. I found a pretty extensive bibliography of all his works. Slowly but surely, I hunted what I thought was all of them down. And then when I found this one, it was a must-have. Now, it turns out this actually had a very limited print run. Special signed editions were limited to 1,000 signed paperbacks and 150 signed hardcovers. In fact, here is a picture of my own with the signatures in front. And I had to go on eBay to find this edition for myself. Most soft covers go from about $90 to about $130 plus shipping. I haven't seen many hardcovers out there, but there was one today I noticed. It was $250 a person was looking for. And those hardcovers, by the way, are numbered out of the 150 that are available. I was able to pick up this one here for $78. But after shipping and taxes, it still got pretty much closer to $88. But I needed it for my collection, needed it, being a book kind of guy. I made an offer on a guy who had it for $90, saying, hey, I'll pick it up for $78, and he agreed immediately. So it was like, all right, I got it for less. Now, that being said, when I walked away from reading this, I can then have buyer's remorse, kind of, and thinking I overpaid for it. For starters, Andrew Vachss only has a hand in the one story, the Vale's Visit story. That's the title of the book. So I ended up getting like 18 pages of new Vachss in my life when all was said and done for the amount of money I spent for it. I'm left with feeling that the whole book was just a way for Andrew Vachss to uplift Joe Lansdale. I don't know how much that Joe Lansdale needed uplifting. Maybe it's like, hey, maybe my readers might like him as well, and I'll introduce them to him through this. Because Joe Lansdale, it sounds like, from what I can see, is a very prolific writer. There's about 15 novels in the Hap and Leonard series alone that were written. And there's also a bunch of short stories and novellas on top of that. Joe Lansdale also wrote 30 other different novels and more novellas as well. And he's got other series on top of that to boot. There's a drive-in trilogy. There are Ned the Seal books. Something called Mark Stone, MIA Hunter. He's got screenplays, comic books galore. There's a lot of Joe Lansdale out there to pick up. So that's what this book... Let me try that one more time. That's what this book was. And it didn't hide it. It was aptly named. A Taste of Hap and Leonard. Get introduced to them and some of their hijinks that are herein. And go out, pick up some more of his books if you like them. You enjoy them further. It was a taste to get you on to purchasing more. If you're one that likes to be introduced to writers, I'd actually suggest picking this up. For the purpose of being introduced to Joe Lansdale, being introduced to these characters, this edition might be just up your alley. I don't know if there are unsigned editions out there. Maybe you can get it for less money than I paid. And if so, I suggest going on that route. But if there are not, then hopefully you can find a copy of this. In total, the whole book is 160 pages. You could rip through this thing in like 2-3 hours. It actually is kind of small print, so maybe a little bit longer. But, hey, this one's going to find a place on my shelf, on my Andrew Vachss workshelf. That's all I'm going to say today. Appreciate you being here. I've been out of the book review business for a while. I actually have a stack next to me of 9 others that I need to get to, so you'll be seeing them coming out shortly, as soon as I can get my notes together and get in front of the camera. In the meantime, thank you very much. Hit the buttons I'd like you to hit, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.